Can you guys hear me okay? I'm a walker. I can't be behind the podium. I've got some goodies. I know they're going to dim the lights pretty soon. Would you guys like me to pass this stuff around so you can see them? Oh, we like goodies. This jar that's got the orange stuff in it, whale food. These are copepods. This is what right whales eat. Right whales are baleen whales. So I'll pass this around. This is a plate of baleen from a humpback, I think. Does that look like humpback to you, Steve? So this is not right whale baleen, but you'll get the concept. This is what they have instead of teeth. They're filter feeders. So this is what they use to catch the copepods that are going around in that jar. That's whale lice. You guys are all done with dinner, right? Yeah, you start. Yeah, that is actually whale lice. They're small crustaceans. They look like crabs. They actually live on the whales' heads. So I'll be talking more about those later. I know you can't wait. Okay. I've been with the Marine Resources Council for 15 years to educate the public about the plight of North Atlantic right whales. This is my first lecture of the 2015 right whale calving season, so I'm excited to be here. So thank you again for having me. We do a lot of our work with the associated scientists at Woods Hole. There is a scientist that comes down from Massachusetts every winter to do research on the right whale migration, and we do a lot of work with him as well. So wanted to give them credit. So back in 1994, our program actually got started by the Cocoa Beach Women's Club. They saw a presentation done by the environmental director at Port Canaveral about the plight of these animals and the issues they face during their migration, the biggest of which at the time was being struck by ships. And when the women in this club heard about what a problem ship strikes were to North Atlantic right whales, they came up with this idea of a shore-based spotter program. Everybody in Cocoa Beach can see the ships going in and out of Port Canaveral. And they said, a lot of us live in high-rise condos. We can see the whales when they come in close to shore. How about if we call you and let you know where the whales are so you guys can plan your trips around when the whales are here? They thought it was a great idea. And the Spotter Network was born. There was about a dozen women doing that back in 1994, and within a year, they had so many people that were interested in helping that they couldn't handle it anymore. And the Marine Resources Council took it over in 1995 with the help of Port Canaveral, and they've been sponsoring the program ever since. That was 20 years ago. So what we're doing is mitigating human impacts. I mean, the whole reason the program got started is so we could warn the ships where the whales are to help keep them safe. We're doing a lot of public education in order to get people involved. We're also gathering data while we're out in the field verifying the sightings so that we can get that information into the national database. And in the process, we do photo ID work as well. This hotline number right here, it's all over the brochure I just handed you. We've got little yellow cards that are business card size that have our hotline number on them. If you think about it, or if you think you're going to be at the beach this winter, put that phone number in your contact list right on your phone, and that way you'll always have it. And people say, oh, that's such a good idea. So why is the program so important? Right now, there are only about 500 whales left in the North Atlantic right whale population. Unfortunately, it's only growing at about 1% every year. This is the only place we know of where North Atlantic right whales come to give birth. The Southeast United States. We never, well, I'm not going to say never. We usually don't see calves show up in the Northeast feeding grounds that we did not see here in the Southeast in the wintertime. So as far as we know, this is the only typical place where they're giving birth. Their greatest threats right now are fishing gear entanglements and ship strikes. And during their migration from the Northeast down to the Southeast, They do pass a lot of busy shipping lanes. They're passing a bunch of ports. They're basically dodging a lot of the ship traffic going in and out. So why are they called right whales? Does anybody know? A few people. Got a few guesses? They're Republicans. I like that. I should add that to my slide. They actually got their name from the whalers. Originally, they're slow-moving. They're really easy to catch. Unfortunately, that's what did them in, which is also what makes our program so successful. But back when they were hunting whales in rowboats and launching them from shore, they killed the first thing they found. So because they came so close to shore, they didn't go very fast. They floated when they were dead, and they got a lot out of them. Once they processed the whales, they were just dubbed the right whales to kill, unfortunately. And this, I don't know if you can see this picture. These are people standing on the deck of a ship next to a rack of right whale baleen. Just to give you an idea how tall it is, it can be at least 7 feet tall sometimes. I know we've got 7-foot tall baleen at the Marine Resources Council in our office in Palm Bay. If you ever have a chance to stop at the Lagoon House, we've got it. You can see it. We think that based on whaling records, the original population of North Atlantic right whales, both in the east and the west, was about 15,000 animals. And by the time they got international protection in 1935, we think there were only 100 left, maybe fewer. And that was 80 years ago. So we've gone from a population of 100 to 500, and it's taken 80 years to do it. So the population's really not growing that fast. So they spend their spring and summer up in the Northeast, Cape Cod Bay, the Bay of Fundy in Canada, Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. They do their feeding, their breeding, all of that up here in the spring and summer. And when the weather gets cold, they head south. They're snowbirds. And when it gets cold out, I go, yay, it's whale season. So I was actually excited about our recent cold front. Hopefully the whales will come down here early. And they usually stop down here in South Georgia and North Florida because our water temperatures here in the wintertime are basically the same as their water temperatures in the Northeast in the summertime. So temperature is basically what drives their migration. This line on the map right here is their federally designated critical habitat area. The rules and the laws within this area are a little more strict than outside that area. And a lot of this area right now is covered by aerial surveys, mostly up in that northern part. But right now, the aerial surveys only go about as far south as St. Augustine. So there's a good amount of coastline from St. Augustine all the way down to Sebastian Inlet that nobody's covering except for coastal volunteers. So we train people on what to look for because whales do go further south than St. Augustine. And we ask people to report sightings so that we can make sure all the ships in the area know where those whales are. How far south do they go? They don't even stop at Sebastian Inlet. A lot of times we get calls from Jupiter, Fort Pierce, West Palm Beach. We've had whales in Miami at the end of the season. So we never really know what we're going to get or what's going to happen, and it's all based on the water temperatures. So a little bit about the whales themselves. They're typically about 50 feet long, and they weigh about 50 tons. The calves, when they're born, any moms out here? 1 ton. 15 feet long and 1 ton at birth. It's no wonder they don't have twins. They will double their birth weight in that first month of life. So that's always pretty impressive to watch. Things that we know also include their lifespan to some degree. We know we've documented a whale that has lived to be at least 60 years old. We think if it weren't for ship strikes and fishing gear entanglements, they'd probably easily live to be 100. We know this because in 1935, the last legal hunt of a right whale happened off the coast of Florida, and it was documented by a newspaper photographer. And this picture appeared in the newspaper, and somebody sent that to the national database, and 50 years later, it was compared to a whale that was still alive. And they matched it, so they knew with at least 50 years that went by, had to be at least 50, and in order to have had a calf with her in 1935, she had to have been at least 10 years old to be sexually mature enough to have had a calf. And that's assuming it was her first one. So she could have been even older than that. Bowhead whales in the Arctic are close relatives of right whales. There was one in recent years that was shown to be 200 years old. So, yeah, the Eskimos caught that one and they found a 200-year-old arrowhead in it. Other things we know about them, females are a little bit larger than males. There's a lot of DNA research going on with these guys. We can basically map out their whole family tree, the entire population of 500 of them. We're learning the gender of a lot of the calves before they become sexually mature. We're also learning who the fathers are of the calves, and there are some fathers out there that we've never seen before. We don't know where they are, but DNA tells us they're out there somewhere. So as far as what to look for a face only a mother could love. These whales very much look like they're upside down. I've seen people publish pictures upside down. They have this really high jawline on their head and these white bumps on them called callosities. Usually black skin. Most of their body is black or dark gray, but they will have white on their underside sometimes. They're pretty fat for their length, which is why the whalers loved them so much. There's no dorsal fin on their back. Most people think of marine mammals, whales and dolphins having that fin that comes up off the back. Makes them noticeable from a boat, which is one of the reasons why they get hit by ships, because people can't see them. Sometimes they'll have a white belly or a white chin, which makes them very identifiable. But a lot of times, the only white we see are those callosities on the head. Speaking of which, did the whale lice make it all the way around? Or is it still going? Oh, we're working on it. Okay, cool. Okay, so here's an aerial shot just to show you what those callosities look like from above. And if you notice on this calf, it really doesn't have much as far as the callosity pattern on the head. But it's the callosities that we use to identify the individuals. And here from above you can also see there's no dorsal fin. So this is a newborn calf, only a few days old. I wanted to show you guys this picture because you can see the area on the head is completely black. They're actually born with the callosities, but the callosities themselves are just rough raised patches of skin that they're born with. And you can actually tell, even though they're not white, you can see where they're gonna be. You can see the little bumps here and there. They're basically like what we would consider calluses. But when the calf is born, these little cyamids that are in that jar going around will move. They'll actually transfer from the mother to the calf and colonize on the calf's head. Are you cringing yet? Okay. So the callosities themselves, they have when they're born, but they're not colonized by the whale lice until after the calf and the mother have had some physical interaction. We cannot use the callosity pattern for individual identification that first year of life because the lice are moving around and creating different shapes and they're finding where they want to go. But we can still identify the calf according to the mother that it's seen with. So Once they do get that callosity pattern established, it goes into the catalog kept by the New England Aquarium. So when we go out and do photo ID work, we're taking pictures of the callosities on the right whales' heads and sending it to the New England Aquarium so they can compare it to cataloged whales and figure out who we see down here every winter. It's really amazing. The people that have been looking at these whales for a number of years can actually look at a whale and identify it. And a lot of them have names. So we do actually use the whale lice for health assessment. If we ever see the lice on different body parts, on the tail or the back or the flippers, and if it's a different color, a lot of times that means the whale is sick. So it was just an example of how different the patterns can be. Things that we're looking for when we go out are this bonnet in the front of the head, how many little islands or dots they have, whether or not it's a continuous callosity or a broken one. Somebody had a lot of time on their hands. They went and gave names to all the little spots on their head so we can compare them later. So other things we look for, other than the callosities on the head, are these black, square, paddle-shaped flippers. Humpback whales, if you guys have ever seen them, have the really long, skinny white flippers. These guys are totally different. So black on both sides and really paddle-shaped. They also have black tails, unlike humpbacks. They're really broad. They have that deep notch in the middle, and the edges all the way around the tail are really smooth. All baleen whales have 2 blowholes on the top of their heads, just like we have 2 nostrils. But in this particular whale, when they come up to exhale, they will actually have a blow that goes in 2 different directions. That's another thing to look for, and I think there's a picture of it in your brochure. No other whale on our coast does this. So if you happen to see a whale from the beach and you can make out that V-shaped blow, it's going to be a right whale. No mistake about that. Here's what humpbacks look like. If you guys haven't seen them, they've got a lot of white on the underside of their tails, long, skinny, white pectoral flippers. And they do also have a dorsal fin. It's not very tall. It's about 3/4 of the way back on their body, but they do have it. And they will show it to you when they're out there. They curve their back a lot when they go down. So that's another thing to look for, is that dorsal fin right there. So this is what baleen looks like in a living right whale. All these little lines are baleen plates all stacked on top of each other. They've got about 250 of them hanging from the roof of their mouth. And that's how they filter feed those little copepods. And that's what their copepods look like. They typically skim feed at the surface, but not always. They need at least 2,500 pounds to 3,000 pounds of copepods a day just in order to survive during the summer. And they eat until the cows come home. They only eat half the year when the food is available. Right whales are very picky. They will not eat anything else. If they can't find that particular species of copepods, they won't eat at all. They will starve. They will go someplace else to look for their food, and they will not settle for something else. Crazy. We believe their reproductive success actually has a lot to do with how well they're finding their food. They have been known to dive pretty deep to find their food, and we know this because we've seen whales come up from the bottom with mud on their heads. And they can hold their breath for typically 20 minutes or so in order to do it. I like seeing the moms down here, because we used to think that was the only reason they were coming here, and a lot of times, being as far south as I am within the critical habitat area, most of the sightings we have are of mothers with their calves. So I do get to see a lot of interactions. It's pretty neat. They typically carry a calf for about a year, only give birth to a single calf, although there has been a documented case in southern right whales of a mother who had her own calf and adopted a second one. Crazy. They're born tail first, like most marine mammals, and their calving interval is usually about every 3 to 5 years, which explains why the population isn't growing very fast. You only have a limited number of reproductively active females. They only give birth one calf at a time, and it's only every 3 or more years. So we like to see as many calves born per season as possible. Being mammals, they nurse, and like I said earlier, that milk is so high in fat content, those calves will double their birth weight in that first month. And speaking of birth rates, this is what they look like. Ever since 1994, we've had a lot of single-digit years in the late 90s. This was the year I started with the program. We had one calf born that season, and another whale died that season. So there are years when the population doesn't grow at all. And those are just the ones we know about. There could be whales dying, and we have no idea that it happened. We did see a big boom. 2001, there were 31 calves born, and then a lot of double-digit years, high teens, 20s. Then in 2009, there were 39 calves born. This was the year that all of these calves started getting old enough to be having calves of their own, and they sure did. So we've had a good number of years where we've had double digits as far as birth rates go, but then we started seeing single digits again. So we're kind of wondering what's going to happen the next few years. So right now, their #1 killer is entanglements and fishing gear. When I started 15 years ago, their #1 killer was ship strikes, and it's actually flip-flopped. Unfortunately, this is a slow, painful death for these guys. Not comfortable. But a lot of times that rope gets entangled in their baleen. They oftentimes starve to death because it keeps them from feeding. If it wraps around their flippers or gets into their skin, especially if it's a young animal that's still growing, they can get infections. They might die from septicemia. Usually it's a long, painful death. Then there's ship strikes. I don't know if you can see this guy down here. That would be a close call right there. Yeah, see things like this. This was taken by Florida Fish and Wildlife. This is a common sight in the wintertime down here. A lot of the aerial surveys are taking place where the ports are, which is exactly the purpose of it. So there are a lot of ships going in and out of ship channels in Fernandina Beach, Brunswick, Jacksonville. And my understanding is the definition of a close call between a ship and a whale is a mile, because that's how long it takes for a large ship to slow down. So, there's a calf that got struck. And it's not necessarily the big commercial ships or the military ships. Recreational boats can do some damage too, depending on how big they are and how fast they're going. You see things like this. This is the same whale. It was originally found by an aerial survey team that took this picture, and then they sent a boat out to document it a little better. And when they did enough research, they found out it was a 60-foot recreational vessel that did that. Fortunately, this whale was spotted 3 years later. That tail fluke fell off, and it survived, but that's not always the case. So what are we doing about it? There are aerial surveys right now that are covering the areas immediately adjacent to the ports, and they fly track lines east and west, north to south, and back up to cover the area, and they do nothing but look for right whales. Every good weather day, they go out flying. Whenever they see a right whale, they photograph it for ID so we can tell who it is, and they send that whale's position to all the ships in the area so they know where the whales are and they can steer clear of them. Everybody on the ground that I deal with who reports whales from shore, we call a ground contact at Florida Fish and Wildlife, and they send out the information to all the ships in the area. There's also a seasonal management area that was established by NOAA Fisheries, and during the calving season, this area that overlaps the critical habitat is the mandatory ship reporting area, and the ships that are coming into port have to report when they're coming in, and in response, they get a message telling them where all the whales are. And then overlapping that is also an area where gillnet fishing has been cut off during the season because there was evidence that gillnets killed a calf one year. It's also in that area where they have the ship speed rule, where any ship over 65 feet long and 300 gross tons has to slow to 10 knots when they're in the area, because it's been shown the heavier the ship and the faster they're going, the more chance that a strike is going to be a fatal one. There was actually a 5-year trial period on that, and about a year ago they decided it was working so well they made it an official law. So right whales, when they're down here, they're mostly solitary, or you might see mom-calf pairs together. There are small groups that might congregate, but they might come and go. They don't necessarily migrate all the way down here together. Up in the Northeast is a totally different story. Mating groups, there could be 30 or more animals in the mating groups in the Northeast. Only 1 or 2 of them might be females. But well, I won't go into it. You know how it goes. Anyway, whales come close to shore. So this is why the whalers thought they were so great, and this is why our program works so great too. That's how close they come. I took this picture off of the Melbourne Causeway, up State Route 192 in Indialantic. This is a mother and her calf back in like 2007, I think. This is mom's head. This is the calf. So mom's tail is like back here somewhere. That surfer really did not care that that 50-ton animal was right behind him. And the whales just cruised along, and they really didn't care about the surfer either. So. But that's why it works so well. And every year I talk to people, and they're like, you know, I've lived here 30 years, and I had no idea I could see whales from standing on the beach. Now you do. A lot of times we'll actually be right down in the sand doing observations or taking photo ID pictures. Beach walkovers are really good to set up a camera on, as long as people aren't walking by and shaking everything. Details. So when we do photo ID on these guys, you know, I've been asked with this camera if we're like the whale paparazzi, but we need a lens like that in order to get shore-based photos. And the disadvantage of shore-based photos is that we can only take a picture of one side of the head. So if we're lucky enough that they turn around or swim in circles for a while, we can usually photograph both sides. But a lot of times one side is all we need. When we can get aerial photos, we do. They're better. You can see the callosity patterns from above a lot better than you can from the side. But shore-based photos aren't too shabby. That's a shore-based photo. This is the calf down here, this little tiny head. But you can definitely make out the individual patterns of that whale. So that's what we shoot to do, but you just got to wait for that right moment when they're just at the right angle and they stick their head out of the water, and hopefully do that. A lot of times when we're going through our photos, we see things that we didn't notice when we were taking the pictures. This whale had a propeller cut in it that wasn't seen until we were going through the photos, getting ready to send them into the database. So we point things out like that, because when they're made aware of scars or injuries, they can watch for whenever somebody else submits a picture and keep track of how well they're recovering from that interaction. So some of the unique things that citizens have helped us contribute to the national database, things like this. We had a pair of fishermen back in July of 2007 report a mother and calf sighting, like I said, in July. Now, calving season is December through March. By the end of March, certainly no later than mid-April, right whales are pretty much gone. If it's a warm winter, they won't come very far south. They'll probably leave early. There's no reason for them to be here. The people who reported this in July were in the middle of a fishing tournament. They said, we've called the Coast Guard, we've called the people running the tournament, nobody believes us, we know what we're looking at. I have a right whale sighting to report. I said, okay, did you get pictures? They actually had a disposable camera on their boat. And they photographed just the calf. Now, we can't use the callosity patterns on a calf for photo ID. Did you get a picture of the mom? No. Oh. Okay. A few months later, this whale was seen in the Northeast with its mother, and they photographed it then. The way they know it's the same one is because they just happened to photograph a calf, which is the only known North Atlantic right whale to have callosity-like growths anywhere else on the body other than the head. So they saw that in the Northeast, thought it was weird, compared it to this photo. We can now say we helped contribute the only sighting of North Atlantic right whales off the coast of Florida during any of the summer months. It's been used in peer-reviewed journal articles. Say, hey, the volunteers actually contributed to that. So we thought that was cool. The mother was Derecha, and she's one that we don't know a whole lot about, but it turns out she gave birth to that calf in the Northeast. She did everything backwards. Northeast, brought her down to the Southeast in the summer, went back up. It turns out this was her second calf. She took her first calf to the Gulf of Mexico. They don't usually go that far south to go all the way around the Keys and up into the Gulf, but this one did. So whenever she does pop up, it's at the weirdest times and in the strangest places, and there are a few whales out there that are just like that. So it's always fun to follow them. So the fact that we can ID the individuals makes the work very interesting. Another unique situation we had was a few years ago, the 2010-11 calving season. There was a whale named Kingfisher who back in 2004, I think it was spotted at the age of 1 off the coast of St. Augustine, severely entangled in fishing gear. We did not think he was going to live, and any attempt to disentangle Kingfisher failed. Whether it was weather, whether it was the whale not cooperating, they had a tracking device on it that they believe a boater cut off because he thought he was helping the whale. And that got turned in, so there was no way to find him. Long story short, he shows up in the Southeast again a year later, looking much better, had much less gear on him than we had last seen him. And literally every year for like 10 years, we kept seeing him. He would just keep coming back. Now, originally, we thought it was just the pregnant females that were coming down here to give birth. And the more we photo ID'd whales, we realized males come down here, juveniles come down here, yearlings will come down here with their mothers, without their mothers. We had no idea what he was doing. It got to the point where the aerial survey teams were placing bets who was going to see him first. And this season, nobody saw him. And we thought maybe his entanglement got the best of him. Maybe he was old enough to go out and find a girlfriend. We didn't know what he was doing. A citizen from Vero Beach called our hotline, and after this sighting in January, she called us in May and said, hey, back in January, we saw whales off the coast. There were like 4 or 5 of them. We took like 75 pictures. Do you want them? Yeah. Send them on over. So we took a look at these. I sent them to Fish and Wildlife because they typically do the photo ID work, and they called me right away and they said, you're not going to believe this. Your citizen found Kingfisher. He was in 2 photos. But he was also spotted with other whales that the aerial survey teams also had not seen all season. So we want to impress upon you guys the fact that even if it's not right away, if you don't report a sighting as soon as it happens, if you can get pictures and are willing to submit them, we can get them to the national database, And we actually learn which whales are down here. We can study their migration habits, their habitat use, their socialization, their reproductive behavior. There's a lot of things we can learn. So just wanted to let you guys know how much you can help. If you're going to be out on the beach, picking up seashells, look behind you. Just saying. If it's cold outside and it's the middle of winter, there might be a whale behind you. We tell people to look for dolphins. We have no idea why they hang out together, but a lot of times bottlenose dolphins are seen with right whales. We're not sure why, but a lot of times people see the dolphins first. They just stare at them for a while and see if something bigger pops up in the middle of them. You never know. Doesn't seem to matter what time of day. I get calls at 7:30 in the morning. I get calls at 5 in the evening. They'll be close to shore whenever. If you are going to go out in hopes of seeing whales, we ask that you go in the morning in case you see something. That way we have time to follow up on it. We're not fighting the sunset trying to get photo ID shots. So mornings are a good time to go, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see them in the evening. We've got tons of educational materials, these brochures, so hopefully you recognize. We've got these yellow cards. If anybody wants extras, knows of shoreline businesses, bait shops, condos, any place where we can pass them out, feel free to take extras. These yellow cards are on the table out by the front door. If you want some, feel free to take extras. So when reporting a sighting to our hotline, we ask that you call right away. Date and time, I would like to think, are right now. The ships really don't care where the whales were 3 days ago. But I do get calls from people who didn't know they were supposed to report the sighting. So even 3-day-old or 4 or 5 month old sightings do end up paying off, so you never know. But location is a good thing. If I can get a specific address where the whales are seen, that's good to know how many there are or what direction they're going, because sometimes we might not be able to get there for an hour. And if that person who spotted the whale can't stay with them, we need to know which direction to go to find them again. So things like distance offshore is good to know. If we need to call you back, a phone number is good. And then we use all that information to find and track the whales, collect the data. We train people right on the beach. We'll call our volunteers out there, give them some field experience, and then those people tend to be the ones that we call when we need help. Okay. They are endangered species, obviously. There are federal regulations and approach laws pertaining to these guys. We do see a lot of human interactions with them, even if it's not boats. We see a lot of surfers go out and get well within 500 yards of whales. That's 5 football fields, to put that into perspective. I know on the water it's hard to judge distance. I've been there. But that is clearly not 500 yards. If anybody wants to prosecute somebody, the penalties can be severe. You know, the people who get the $10,000 fines are usually like the big cruise lines and stuff like that. But if there are surfers and people out there who don't know that the whales are endangered, they don't know about the approach laws, they might just be informed or get a letter, and that's it. So they usually make the punishment fit the crime. But we do see things like this. This was a mother and calf that we saw back in 2009, and some boaters decided to check them out. The calf, they got separated for a little bit. Calf was right up against this other boat. So another good opportunity for public education. We see things like this. This was this season, actually in March. I had a citizen submit this photo. Here's our mother and calf. The Volunteer Sighting Network, incidentally, just named this mother Halo, our first whale that we got to name. This is the same whale. She was checked out. These are both in Cocoa Beach. She was approached by all sorts of people. Surfers, paddleboarders, boaters. Didn't seem to matter. Everybody wanted to check her out. And that's what we do. We wouldn't be here, obviously, without Harbor Branch and the funding we get from the Protect Florida Whales specialty license plates. Port Canaveral has supported our program from the beginning when they gave that presentation to the Cocoa Beach Women's Club. And a lot of what we do is supported largely by these two organizations. So. And if you didn't see them when you came in tonight, we've got our float rope doormats with us. They're made out of the line that used to tie lobster traps together, and they're not allowed to use it anymore. There was a buyback program, and instead of dumping all that line into a landfill, they repurposed it and made doormats out of it. So we do have some for sale out here in the lobby if you're interested. And we've also got our t-shirts out there if you want to support the program. So, yeah. Any questions?